Anywho, but we do have a Michigan game coming up this weekend, and Steve, did I see something correct? And maybe it was a different team, but did I see that Colorado State is going to be running the air raid, or was I okay? So I did see that correct, and I think you may have posted that, if I'm not mistaken. But nonetheless, folks, if you don't follow Steve on Twitter, let me get your Twitter handle pulled up. Like the ultimate gems that you could ever expect and want, the gems that you didn't know you needed, Steve tweets them out. So Steve, can you give us kind of just a rundown of Colorado State, and just let us know what we should be looking for and what we'll be looking at on Saturday?
Mm-hmm. Colorado State's one of the teams, just like USC, where you can throw away last year's results when analyzing this year's team because that is how different of a look they are. Just like USC, they have a new coaching staff, and with a new coaching staff, you get an incoming horde of transfers, and that's exactly what they have. They have several, I think five Nevada transfers that are going to be on their projected starting offense. And their head coach Jay Norvell comes from Nevada, where they ran the air raid last year, and they're bringing over his offensive coordinator as well. So this team is basically has a lot of what you saw with the Carson Strong, Romeo Dubs, Nevada teams from the past few years at Colorado State. So it's going to be a transformed unit from the one you saw last year that really struggled offensively, ranked 98th in scoring, and never really moved the ball too well. But Mark mentioned it earlier in the show. The biggest replacement Colorado State's going to have is Trey McBride, who is an NFL draft pick tight end currently with the Arizona Cardinals, won the John Mackey Award for the nation's best tight end last year. So there were areas of talent on that Colorado State team, as well as their defensive end, Scott Passion, who was a transfer from Miami. He's leaving now. So they're going to have to generate a pass rush too. But this Colorado State team, they have transfers at about half of their starting positions, just looking across the entire roster. So this is a team that's going to have to mold and fit into some new systems. And they have a new offensive coordinator who is Matt Mummy, who is the son of Hal Mummy, who invented the air raid offense. So you have a direct air raid lineage there. And they're going to run a lot of 4-out receivers. You have Torrey Horton and Melquan Stovall at the receiver positions. They were the secondary and tertiary wide receiver options last year for Nevada. Both had really good stat lines. So you're going to have them, and their quarterback's going to be Clay Millen, who was one of Nevada's backups last year. So an established connection between those few already, and several offensive linemen are from Nevada.
Steve, is there a lineage there as well? Millen? Is that
no, it is not.
Son?
No relation to Matt Millen.
Give it a shot. All right.
I mean, you gotta be careful throwing Matt Millen around from us former Lions fans, man.
I didn't throw out Matt.
We have PTSD
Millen,
that
but
name, okay?
Anyway,
okay. It's very triggering. Very triggering.
Yes.
Boy, that was a tough time.
So
Jay Norvell, is that son of Mike at Florida State or no relation?
No relation.
Wow. What are the odds of that? To be in coaching and have those last names and have no relation, that's interesting.
Yeah, Steve, from the sounds of it, maybe if this was week 3, I will be a little bit more intrigued with could Colorado State bring an element to this game that we're not really expecting or prepared for. Not that it would influence the result differently in my mind, but could it be a little bit different of a flow to the game? But having that much turnover on your roster and staff personnel, that can look very, very messy in your first game. Would you agree?
I would agree with that, and it's a shame for Colorado State that they don't get really a warm-up game. They have to face the reigning Big Ten champion, a team that made the college football playoff last year, instead of getting an FCS team, which they did lose to their FCS team pretty badly last year. But point aside, you want more of a warm-up game to get these guys together on the field. You've had fall camp together and you've had spring ball together, but I think it's a different element when you go out with your guys on a Saturday afternoon and have to play together, because you can't replicate those in-game experience in practice.
Yeah. I will say, as far as offenses, because if I'm not mistaken, and they may run a different variation, but the air raid in its truest form is a relatively easy offense to pick up because number one, the pass protection is going to be either 5-man pro or 6-man pro. Like that part's relatively easy. So from what I know, it's not a ton of concepts as far as learning on the outside, the receivers, things of that nature, the quarterback. But someone had mentioned just basically holding the ball for going 3 and out, holding the ball for 30 seconds could be bad. Yeah, if it's and that's the difficult part with the air raid is because you do throw the ball a lot. So if you're not having completions and the ball's hitting the ground, you're gonna have your defense right back out there pretty quickly, and that that could be a very tough situation.
Especially if the offense is like running the football and like just dominating you at the line of scrimmage, and all of a sudden your defense is bent over, gasping for air. That can get bad very, very quickly. So, I mean, think about the air raid. You can get yourself for some third and longs very, very easy if you don't get those quick completions. So, I don't know. I mean, I don't think there's a Michael Crabtree or what's the guy? Oh my God, he broke the record for passing touchdowns in the season at Texas Tech. Can't think of his name. Harold.
Passing touchdowns?
Yeah, in the regular season.
Quarterback Harrell.
Only Zappy has the
Harold, right?
record for touchdowns.
Graham
Yeah,
Harrell.
Zappy has the
Graham
record
Harrell.
for touchdowns now.
Well, but before then, it was Graham Harrell, wasn't it, at Texas Tech?
No, it's Joe
Regular
Burrow.
season?
Burrow, and then it might have been Harrell.
I just remember that Texas.
Anyway,
it
Graham,
was-
yeah, they've got a nice line of quarterbacks at Texas Tech. Absolutely.
yeah, but yeah, I just
DJ
but
Simon.
it should be interesting to see. The air raid offense against the Michigan defense. Maybe it'll be at least a good workout for the Michigan secondary and allow those guys. So, like you said, Mark earlier, could we see potential, chinks in the armor in the Michigan secondary? Like you don't want to see the Colorado State receivers getting free and breaking some plays down the field, right? Because maybe not Colorado State doesn't have the personnel to really take advantage, but I definitely know Ohio State does. So, that could be one of those things that Michigan fans can evaluate in this game. How's the secondary do with a pass-heavy offense?
Unless Colorado State has another couple, Rashard Higgins?
Colorado
Or
State.
NFL players at wide receiver. Their names are escaping me. The Cowboys receiver, the Browns receiver, and the
Michael
Lamb.
Gallup, Rashard
Yeah.
Higgins. Colorado State's produced a lot of NFL talent at wide receivers lately, and those Nevada transfers could join that line. I mean, Rashard Higgins, Olabisi Johnson was drafted by the Vikings. Michael Gallup played for the Cowboys. So yeah, they have produced a lot of talent at wide receiver lately, and I think that these two Nevada guys could really develop into that next crop.
Well, based on Colorado State running the air raid offense, Dre, I've got bad news for you. I would be willing to bet that Jim Harbaugh is going to run the ball quite a bit in that first half to kind of keep that offense off the field. Not that it would be super dangerous and it's going to score a bunch of points on Michigan, but just that potential of having your defense out there quite a bit. I think he's going to run the ball, kind of give the defense the plenty of time to rest, so you can just get your blood pressure ready now, because I'm pretty sure we're going to see a lot of Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards in that first half.
Oh, I don't need anything for blood pressure. I need something like for alertness. So I have to have a lot of coffee and stuff like that, so I don't get bored watching it. That's all.
How do you get bored watching your team? How does that happen? I don't get it.
I get
Especially the
bored.
first game of the season when you haven't seen them for 9 months.
It's
How
not
long
that- It's
Come
not my
on.
team. It's not about being my team. It's about the opponent. It's the opponent that makes it tough. Like, so I can deal with my team style of play if the opponent is quality, and I'm like, okay, this is interesting. I can I don't want the opponent so good that I'm sweating out of stress. But at the same time, where if we're just slicing and dicing up the field, I also find that a little boring as well. So it's not
Great.
my team. It's the opponent.
Dre, this fact may wake you up, and Steve, this is actually an inside joke. Colorado State led Iowa at halftime last year, so I'm sure that's gonna scare you.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, if you think that there's a bunch of things that Michigan has to do for Colorado State to win, like fumbling and making special team errors and misassignments and stuff like that. Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I will say this: I love the Colorado State uniforms. The Rams, I think, is awesome. And Boulder, I've been to Boulder, Colorado. It's actually really nice.
Fort Collins.
Yeah, I was gonna say
Fort
Boulder
Collins.
is
I'm sorry,
CU.
Fort Collins. Excuse me. That's what I've been to Fort Collins. Yeah.
Speaking of Collins and Colorado State, I guarantee I am the only one here who has watched the only Michigan-Colorado State game in the series of the two schools.
In person?
No, have watched a Michigan-Colorado State game. There's only been one. It was the 1994 Holiday Bowl.
Yeah,
Todd Collins, not Fort Collins, was the MVP of the game. Of course, he played for about 15 years in the NFL.
Yeah, former Giant quarterback, right? Played in
Redskins.
Yeah, he was really good one year with the Redskins, filling in as the backup. I remember him there.
I think you might be thinking of Kerry Collins, Dre.
Kerry Collins,
Penn State.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Kerry Collins.
Yeah.
Kerry Collins made a lot more money.
Very true. I think the last
Went to a Super Bowl.
Well, a throwback player I remember from Colorado State was their quarterback, Alex Van Pelt, who I think was Aaron Rodgers' quarterbacks coach with Green Bay for a little bit. I may be wrong on that aspect, but I think he was a QB coach in the NFL for a couple years at least. He might still be around. I don't know.
When I think of Colorado State, I think about Steven Jackson. That's what I think about.
He didn't go
to Oregon State.
Oregon State.
He didn't go to Colorado State.
In case any of our viewers are wondering, Dre is a huge college football history buff. Huge.
Yes.
Huge.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I don't know why for years I've always thought
they don't have the same colors.
I'm sorry.
I'm
sorry. You know what it is? I know what it is. It's the Steven Jackson played for the Rams. Colorado State is the Rams. I'm sorry.
Yeah. That's
no. Like it's a visual. There is a visual connection in my mind. It's because they have the same helmet, different color scheme.
I'll give you that. I will give you that.
That's what it is.
But goodness gracious, yes, I could have been more off.
Yeah, I know what my go-to joke's going to be to get under Dre's skin. It's going to be things like, "Oh yeah, Connor Cook." Yeah, when I think of Michigan quarterbacks, I think of Connor Cook.
No, hey, look.
Dre will probably just roll with it. Like and he probably could have played better while he was here. It probably could have been okay.
At least there is some kind of connection where it makes sense why I could have got confused. It could have been worse. Right?
You stretched it, but you need a connection. Yeah.
Okay.
Sure.
I'm sorry.
Sure.
Well, I'm sorry. I'm not extremely educated on former Colorado State players.
Perfect. So I've got a question for you, Steve.
Yes.
So for the Colorado State defense, right, when they're walking into their meeting room, who is the guy that they are circling on the scouting report? Like there's always the number one guy that you talk about. If we don't stop him, life is going to be very hard on Saturday. Who do you feel like Colorado State is circling as that guy for the Michigan offense?
Well, it has to be Blake Corum, because last year Michigan didn't pass the ball more than 17 times in their first 4 games. They're going to run the ball, I think, early and often in this one. I know the QB situation that's going on where they're going to put McNamara out for week 1 and McCarthy for week 2. And I don't know how much they're going to get out of that, but they're going to run the ball a lot because that's a safe play here. Blake Corum's going to have a great first half, and then I think you're going to see Donovan Edwards probably get a bulk of the carries in the second half and then go further down the depth chart, just like you saw in that win over Northern Illinois last year. So I think it's definitely the running game that Colorado State has to be the most aware of to stop. But I will have to say, I think this Michigan receiving core is as good as we've seen in a long time, especially with Ronnie Bell returning. We only got a very small sample size of what we could see from Bell last year, and he looked really promising in that small sample size against Western Michigan. So when you add him to Cornelius Johnson, Roman Wilson, then Andrell Anthony, who played really well in that Michigan State game, I really like the makeup of this core, especially with a good tight end as a great support for them. So I do think that Michigan has a lot of talent, the skill position players this year, and I think Colorado State has a lot to be aware of.
Best Michigan receiving core since probably Plexico Burris or Earl Rogers.
Nice try. Nice try.
Okay, I'm done.
Happen. Yeah, that's not going to
That is incredible.
This is not going to go away anytime soon. Yeah.
No, it's not going anywhere. So, Steve, you mentioned quickly the quarterbacks situation, and that has been the talk of our stream basically every stream. What are your thoughts on the method that Jim Harbaugh is using to decide on who his quarterback is going to be?
It's unique. I'll give it that. But you have to eventually decide on a starter. I really admire what Kirby Smart did at Georgia last year, where they were in a good rhythm under Stetson Bennett. And JT Daniels was the original starter there. But they didn't want to bring JT Daniels back in the starting lineup because they didn't want to buck any of the trends that they had going for them in their direction. So they decided on Stetson Bennett until he faced adversity, and Bennett really never had too many issues. They just had one loss in the conference championship against Alabama, and then Bennett won the national championship. So I think it's better for your morale early on just to decide on a quarterback. And Michigan has a pretty weak non-conference schedule this year. You get UConn, Hawaii, Colorado State. No team in there finished with a winning record last year, and Hawaii might be one of the 5 worst teams in the country this season. So
they gave up 63 to Vandy.
Pretty weak, Steve.
Hey, UConn looked good.
Yeah, for a quarter.
Yeah, and look.
Concerns. Well, now that UConn, we got to circle that game now. That'll be a big deal.
You know the schedules. Doesn't Michigan and UCLA, aren't they in a battle for the worst non-conference schedule between those two?
Who's UCLA have? Bowling Green.
They've got like Bowling Green, Alabama State.
Oh, and South Alabama. Oh, yeah. That's pretty bad. Hey, Bowling Green beat Minnesota last year. So
but you know what?
Defense returning.
And granted, I know your scheduling is done in advance, but at least it's not like UCLA is like the defending Pac-12 champions and stuff like that. You know, it's just like it's the season that Michigan had, and it's like that's how they start the season. You know, it's just whatever.
But see, I would in kind of the same light that I mentioned with Michigan. I mean, UCLA, I just pulled up their schedule, and yes, the out of conference is abysmal. But they got to play Utah. They've got Oregon. They got USC on the schedule. So those are 3 ranked teams as of now. But I mean, it's not as if they're not going to be tested. They're going to play some teams that they're pretty clearly going to be underdogs in. So they've got some tough games coming down the pipeline. So we'll know who they are by the end of the season, as we do with just about everybody.
Desmond, you can combine the 3 opponents between UConn, Colorado State, Hawaii, and South Alabama, Alabama State, and Bowling Green. You combine the best players, all 6 of those teams, and they still will be 20-point underdogs to Michigan.
Well, what if Colorado State got to bring Steven Jackson back and him in his prime play for them?
You know,
I mean, that would probably change things a little bit.
That would be an issue if somehow Steven Jackson played for Colorado State. I don't know who suggested that, but
it's so wild because Steven Jackson was such a good running back.
Yeah,
he was really good.
He's a beast.
And on top of that, if they got to play a home game in Boulder against Michigan, then they'd really.
You know, I should have stopped when I was ahead. When I said Boulder as opposed to Fort Collins, that should have been like a precursor that I was about to be very wrong with my take. So. I can eat that one. Go ahead.
You're driving Steve nuts. He's just my goodness.
I can't even think of who the quarterback of that super team would be. I can't pick a guy. I think I'd go Matt McDonald of Bowling Green.
Yes, you're the guy to do it, Dave. You tell us.
I was going to say Joel Klatt. I mean, he.
I mean, you have Zion Turner with UConn. You have
Dan Orlovsky,
Bradley at South Alabama. I don't know. That super team, you're right. Michigan would probably run through that super team, but that super team's defense would just be the Bowling Green defense, basically.
That was a Colorado guy.
I know. I was joking and Raz and Dre.
Okay, nice.
It's all right. Hey, look, man. Something you can't some days, man. You have days where you can be off. I can't have a wealth of knowledge in here, but sometimes things get mixed up a little bit. It's
Well,
okay.
I think what's happening is our viewers, Steve and Mark, are now getting a view of what it's like when we would work together and sit right next to each other. Things like that would come out of Dre's mouth on a regular basis. So he would get teased by our coworkers in a fun way on a regular basis because things like that he would say. So it worked out well
Yeah,
for
it did.
us, I guess.
Being the expense of somebody else's joke, the butt of somebody else's jokes tends to work out pretty well, but it's okay. I can take it. We'll see what the joke is Saturday night when the Buckeyes play the Fighting Irish. We'll see what the joke is that night. I can't wait. I can't wait. Steve, what do you think? What is your thoughts on that game?
Ohio State has who I think is the best quarterback and the best wide receiver in the country this year. They have a top 3 running back. They're as loaded as a team offensively going into a season as I've seen in a while. And you also have other good wide receiver talent in that room, such as Marvin Harrison Jr., who had a really good Rose Bowl outing. And then I like some of the makeup of the defense, returning guys like Steel Chambers in there. I think Ohio State is going to rout Notre Dame, and I think the spread, which is about 15.5, is about what I expect for that game. So the Buckeyes are going to be
17.5.
Yeah, I was gonna say I think it moved. It moved.
Crazy.
The Buckeyes are going to be pretty sensational this year, and that's a team that I definitely have my eye on. I know they did have that blemish against Oregon last year in non-conference play, which was a bit of a surprise, but I really think that this team is going to roll through the Big Ten this season.
You think you're giving Dre hives by saying that, Steve?
I mean, look, we all know it, and it's funny. Throwing Ohio State barbs and jabs, it just triggers our chat, man. I've been looking at our chat this whole time, and ever since I made the little comment 30 minutes ago about what Minnesota did to Ohio State's defense, that just triggered everything.
You set it off. You set the chat off.
Yeah,
Dre is here for the people. He is absolutely here for the people.
No, look, we all know how stacked Ohio State is. I mean, the biggest, question in terms of how it pertains to Michigan and how I see that matchup going this year is I believe that as of now, Michigan definitely has all it takes offensively to compete with Ohio State's offense. They're not as good, no way, but they can compete. The question is going to be the Ohio State defense. Will they be able to fix the issues that they had last year, and and not be as vulnerable, especially for 2 things: their intensity and focus in terms of their physicality, and also just gap assignment, tackling, just pretty much everything that went wrong in their rush defense last year. And Michigan was able to take advantage of that, because when we get down to November, late November, the last Saturday in November, and we play that game, part of the way you can neutralize that explosive offense is keeping them off the field, right? So that's really something I'm going to be watching, and I think a lot of Michigan fans should be paying attention closely this Saturday night when Notre Dame plays Ohio State. How focused is Ohio State? Do they seem like they are different defensively? Those are things that quite frankly, is very relevant to Michigan, because we all know as long as Michigan takes care of their business, which they should, based on how their schedule is looking, that we're on a collision course once again to get back to Indy.
It'll be exciting. Steve, any game in particular this weekend? I mean, which I think we have games until Sunday. Which one are you going to be absolutely dialed into? Can't miss. Got to stick with it. What game are you most looking forward to?
I'm going to throw out 3 rapid fire matchups that I think are evenly matched. Yes, Ohio State, Notre Dame, and Oregon, Georgia are your highly ranked matchups. But look at the spreads on those. Both of those are 3-score spreads. So let's go with some of the more evenly matched up games I'm looking forward to this weekend. Penn State, Purdue, Thursday night. Purdue coming off a 9-4 season, beat the likes of Iowa, Michigan State, and had a really thrilling Music City Bowl win over Tennessee. I'm really looking forward to seeing what Aiden O'Connell and that offense can do against the Penn State defense, which was pretty stout last year, and also see if Penn State can have any improvement on offense. They had kind of a bit of a funk in the second half of the season with Sean Clifford running the show, and he'll have he'll have to operate without Jahan Dotson this year as receiver. So I'm excited to see how Penn State offense looks this year, especially after the loss of Dotson, and seeing if they can rebuild from that. On Saturday, I'm looking forward to Arkansas Cincinnati. Cincinnati had 9 NFL draft picks. Only Georgia and LSU had more. So Cincinnati really has to replace a ton, including their starting quarterback, Desmond Ridder, as well as their talented corner duo in Sauce Gardner and Kobe Bryant. Arkansas brings a lot to the table with a really high-powered rushing game. They have their quarterback, KJ Jefferson, returning, and they have really good talent on defense and Bumper Pool and Jalen Catalon. I think that's going to be an evenly matched game at Fayetteville, one that I have my eyes turned to. And the other game, which might not be on some of your radar, and I think it should be, is Houston versus UTSA at the Alamo Dome. UTSA has gotten so much more hype recently in the last year. The Alamo Dome's getting some of its highest attendance numbers. It's going to be loud in there. And you have 2 Texas-based teams playing in a non-conference battle. Both went 12-2 last year. One won the CUSA. The other one finished number 17 and appeared in the AAC Championship and beat Auburn in the Birmingham Bowl. So you have 2 great Texas teams with a lot of returning talent playing in non-conference there. And I think that game, I think it deserves a better platform than CBS Sports Network.
Nice. I definitely have my eyes on that Arkansas-Cincy game to see what exactly happens. What, does Cincy bounce back, like you mentioned, and to see if KJ Jefferson kind of takes that next step, because he's pretty dynamic. He's a really good quarterback and had a really good season for them last year.
Reminds me of Dante Culpepper.
Ooh, that's actually a really good comparison. Really good one.
They're both like 6'4", 250-pound quarterbacks and really mobile and have a big arm.
Yeah, that's very true. Dre, what games are sticking out to you this weekend that you're going to be tuned into? Can't miss.
Well, my alma mater is Central Michigan University, so I'm looking forward to playing Oklahoma State and potentially shocking. It probably won't happen, but upsetting them again. So I'm looking forward to that. Tomorrow night, I'm looking forward to seeing Pittsburgh versus West Virginia, excuse me. JT Daniels I believe he started for West Virginia, so I'd like to see how he does with the Mountaineers. And also, like I said, Saturday, I'm looking forward to, of course, Notre Dame and Ohio State. Those are my main 3 for sure.
Weren't JT Daniels and Keaton Slovis both at USC at one point?
2019, JT Daniels got hurt to start the season, and Slovis took over.
Wow, that's unique. I wonder how
the transfer
often that
portal,
has happened.
gentlemen. The transfer portal, gentlemen, has changed everything. You see so much. A local radio show that I listen to here, they did a college football shuffle in which they basically were trying to see, do you know where this player is playing now? And it was really hard for some of the people to do it because of the transfer portal, guys are changing schools so much now. Like, it's like, wait a minute, I thought he plays there now, especially the quarterback position. So what is this, JT Daniels' 3rd school now?
Yeah.
So I mean, it's how often does that happen, right? So for a name, there may be some kids you never heard of before, but that for a name like JT Daniels, you just don't really see that very often,
I appreciate the Central Michigan Oklahoma State shout out. I just wrote a story on the 2016 game, an in-depth retrospective one, and that's one of the wildest endings in college football history with the untimed down and Hail Mary hook and ladder to end the game. So that's definitely an interesting one. I bet Mike Gundy has that one circled on his calendar.
Oh, he was upset. I never get that. I'm like, well, hey, have better prevent defense is all I got to say. You got to, and because it wasn't, if I'm not mistaken, they did a delay of game. It was a delay of game call, correct?
No, here's what happened. It was 4th down for Oklahoma State. There were 4 seconds left, and they just gather in a tight formation around Mason Rudolph, nobody out wide, and Rudolph just launches the ball down the sideline, no receiver in the area. They call intentional grounding, which you can call there. It's very rarely called there, but they called it. Except the incorrect part that they did was it gave Central Michigan an untimed down when the game is allowed to end on an offensive penalty. I think you've seen, I remember the Baltimore Ravens doing it before. I remember TCU doing it before, ending the game just on a play where everyone just holds for a long time, commits holding penalties. Yeah, you can end on an offensive penalty. But they incorrectly rewarded Central Michigan an untimed down, and Cooper Rush launched it to Jesse Krall. Krall laterals it to Corey Willis, and Willis beats Oklahoma State cornerback Ashton Lampkin in a foot race to the end zone, and they win that game.
It was awesome. It was awesome. I to this day, like it was one of the, you don't, especially if you're a student of a small school like Central Michigan, you don't expect those type of upsets. Now, granted, Central Michigan's actually had a pretty good amount of upsets the last 20 years. I mean, we go into Iowa and beat the Hawkeyes at Kinnick. We've beaten MSU at Spartan Stadium, so we've had a couple good upsets, but. No, that was definitely like one of the biggest upsets in college football over the last, I think, 10 years. Not the biggest, but one of them for sure. And definitely looking forward to seeing that rematch Thursday.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's going to be an exciting weekend. I'm really excited, and the Sunday slate adding some games too is really nice. So